Chioma sat in her office, eyes glued to her laptop screen as she struggled to keep up with the endless deadlines. The air conditioning hummed softly, but it did nothing to cool the fire of frustration burning inside her. She had barely recovered from the morning's chaos when her phone rang. Davis. Again. She sighed heavily and picked up.
Babe, I need your help.
Davis's voice came through, sounding urgent. Chioma rolled her eyes. She already knew where this was going. Money. It was always money.
What is it this time?
She asked, barely masking her irritation.
I just need $2,000, babe. You and I both know that's not a big deal. You have it. I know you have it.
Chioma's grip on the phone tightened. Her heart pounded, but not in the way it used to when she first met Davis. This wasn't love anymore. It was pure exhaustion.
Davis, are you mad?
She snapped.
You already lost $5,000 of my money in that stupid Forex trading. $5,000. And you have the audacity to call me, asking for more?
Babe, listen to me.
Davis began, but she cut him off.
No, you listen. I told you I needed to restock my perfume business, and you went ahead and gambled my money away. Now you want more? Are you possessed?
Davis chuckled nervously.
Babe, I swear this time it's different. My friend showed me a new strategy.
Chioma exploded.
You idiot! Lord, hold me before I commit murder today.
She slammed her laptop shut and stood up. She was done. Done being the fool. Done playing the role of the supportive girlfriend.
You know what?
She said, her voice dangerously calm.
Take off everything I ever bought you.
Davis laughed, but when he saw the look on Chioma's face, the laughter died in his throat.
Babe, you're overreacting.
Necklace, your shirt, your watch, your hand chain, your shoes. In fact, your boxers. Take it off, now.
His eyes widened in shock.
Chioma, are you serious?
Very serious. You want my money, but you'll leave with nothing that belongs to me.
Davis hesitated. He looked around the room, as if hoping for some divine intervention. But Chioma didn't flinch. One by one, he removed the items, his face twisting in humiliation. Chioma grabbed his wallet and pulled out the last 5,000 naira she had given him for emergency expenses.
Now get out.
Davis stood in nothing but his underwear, glaring at her.
You'll regret this.
Chioma laughed, a deep, bitter laugh.
Regret? If anything, I regret not doing this sooner.
With one final glare, Davis stormed out. As soon as the door shut behind him, Chioma collapsed onto her chair, her heart pounding. She should have felt relieved, but instead, she felt empty. She had wasted 2 whole years on a man who had done nothing but drain her emotionally, mentally, and financially. She let out a deep breath. This was the end. Or maybe it was the beginning of something new. The hot Anambra sun beat down as Chioma stepped out of the car, stretching her arms after the long journey from Lagos. The compound was alive with the sound of laughter, traditional music, and the chatter of relatives preparing for Ifunaya's upcoming wedding. Her mother, Mama Chioma, was already waiting for her at the entrance. Dressed in a beautifully wrapped ankara, she spread her arms wide.
Chioma, my daughter, welcome home.
Chioma smiled, embracing her mother.
Mama, you look good. How are you?
I would have been better if my only daughter had a husband,
Mama Chioma said, eyeing her up and down. Chioma groaned. Not this again.
Mama, I just got here. Can we not start with this marriage talk?
Her mother sighed dramatically, holding her chest.
Chioma, you are not getting younger. Look at your cousin Ifunaya, about to marry a respectable man. Look at all the women your age, settling down with responsible men. You, my daughter, are still in Lagos, chasing one nonsense job that does not even respect you.
Chioma inhaled deeply. She loved her mother, but the woman's ability to stress her out was a talent.
Mama, my job is fine. I'm not suffering.
You call working day and night fine? Where is the man to take care of you, to support you? Do you want to be an old woman with only work and no husband?
Chioma exhaled sharply.
Mama, please, I beg you in the name of God. Let me rest. I came for Ifunaya's wedding, not an intervention on my single life.
Mama Chioma's eyes glowed with mischief.
You know, there is someone I want you to meet.
Chioma frowned.
Here we go.
Her mother ignored her.
His name is Chief Obiora, a wealthy businessman, successful, a true Igbo man. You will like him.
Chioma chuckled dryly.
Mama, I am not interested.
Chioma, at least meet him. Just greet him. If you don't like him, no problem.
Chioma rubbed her temples.
Fine, one meeting. That's it.
Later that evening, Chioma sat under the canopy where the wedding guests were gathered, sipping a cold drink. The celebration was in full swing. Women in brightly colored lace danced, the men exchanged jokes, and the aroma of spicy jollof rice and grilled meat filled the air. She was still rolling her eyes over her mother's matchmaking attempt when a deep, commanding voice pulled her attention.
So, you're the famous Chioma.
Chioma turned and was met with the sight of a tall, broad-shouldered man dressed in a rich, embroidered kaftan. He had an air of authority about him, the type of man who walked into a room and owned it. His Igbo accent was thick, his tone confident.
I am Obiora.
He said, extending a hand. Chioma shook it out of courtesy, her eyes narrowing slightly. So this was her mother's latest matchmaking attempt.
I heard a lot about you.
He continued, a small smirk playing on his lips.
And now that I've met you, I can say one thing for sure.
Chioma raised a brow.
What's that?
I'm going to marry you.
Chioma nearly choked on her drink.
Excuse me?
She asked, half laughing.
You heard me.
Obiora leaned back in his seat, completely unbothered by her shock.
From the moment I saw you, I knew.
Chioma blinked. Was this man normal?
Chief Obiora, is this how you approach all women?
Not at all. I am a man who knows what he wants.
Chioma smirked, crossing her arms.
Well, I am a woman who does not like being told what to do.
Obiora chuckled.
Good. I like a challenge.
Something about his confidence was both annoying and intriguing. She had spent the last 2 years with a man who lacked direction, who made excuse after excuse for his failures. And here was Chief Obiora, who didn't just have confidence, he had power. Chioma shook her head.
You're very sure of yourself.
Obiora's silver watch caught the evening sun as he adjusted his cuff.
When a man is sure, he doesn't waste time.
Chioma laughed lightly.
Well, you're wasting yours because I am not marrying you.
Obiora smiled, completely unfazed.
You'll see.
And for the first time in a long while, Chioma felt something unexpected. Curiosity. Chioma sat at her desk in her Lagos office, staring blankly at her laptop screen. The presentation she was supposed to be reviewing had been sitting in front of her for almost an hour, but her mind was elsewhere, or rather, on someone else, Chief Obiora. She shook her head, frustrated with herself. Why was she even thinking about him? He wasn't her type. Too bold, too confident, too Igbo too. Everything she had been avoiding in a man. She had spent years making sure she never ended up with a man like her father, rich, entitled, and ultimately unreliable. Yet she couldn't forget the way Obiora looked at her, like a man who had already decided she belonged to him. A loud ping from her phone jolted her out of her thoughts. She sighed and picked it up, only for her stomach to twist in irritation. Davis.
You need to send me back all the gifts I gave you, every single one.
Chioma's face twisted in disgust. The audacity. This man had lived off her for 2 years, failed at every business she had helped him start, wasted her money on a disastrous forex trading gamble, And now he had the guts to demand a refund? She typed furiously.
You mean the same gifts you gave me while I was paying your rent, feeding you, and funding all your nonsense businesses?
Davis responded almost instantly.
That's not the point. If you want to play games, I can take legal action. Don't think I won't.
Chioma burst into laughter. Legal action? On what grounds? She should be the one suing him for damages.
Davis, you are a clown. If you're that broke, just say so.
She blocked his number. Good riddance. She threw her phone on the desk and exhaled deeply. That chapter of her life was over. It had to be. That evening, Chioma met up with her best friends, Ivy and Doreen, at their usual spot, a rooftop lounge in Victoria Island. The Lagos skyline shimmered in the distance as they sipped their cocktails.
So,
Ivy started, giving Chioma a pointed look.
who is this Chief Obiora we've been hearing about?
Chioma rolled her eyes.
Please, let's not start.
Doreen smirked.
Oh, we must start. He followed you all the way to Lagos, and you're acting like it's normal.
Wait.
Ivy's eyes widened.
He's in Lagos? He traveled all the way from Anambra for you?
Chioma sighed.
I don't know why.
You know why?
Doreen said.
That man has money, confidence, and a plan. Unlike some people we won't name.
Chioma shot her a look.
Please don't mention Davis. That one is officially history.
Ivy grinned.
Good. Now, let's focus on Obiora. Are you really not interested?
Chioma hesitated.
I don't date Igbo men.
Oh, please.
Doreen waved a hand.
That's the biggest lie you tell yourself. You don't date Igbo men because of your father, not because of them.
Chioma froze, feeling her breath catch in her throat. Doreen had hit a nerve. Ivy, sensing the shift, softened her voice.
Babe, you can't keep running from your past. Obiora is not your father.
Chioma took a slow sip of her drink, avoiding their gazes.
Even if I wanted to give him a chance, I don't even know if I can handle a man like him.
Ivy smirked.
Then maybe, just maybe, you should let him show you.
The next day, Chioma was in her office, swamped with work, when her assistant Tolu peeked in.
Miss Chioma, there's someone here to see you.
Chioma frowned. Who? Tolu grinned.
Chief Obiora.
Chioma nearly knocked over her coffee.
What?
She stood up so fast she almost lost her balance.
He's here? Now?
Tolu nodded.
Yes, Ma. Should I send him in?
Chioma inhaled sharply, quickly adjusting her blouse and hair. She was annoyed that her first reaction was to check her reflection.
What was this man doing to her? Let him in.
The door swung open, and in walked Chief Obiora, looking just as composed and confident as ever.
Good afternoon, Achalugo.
Chioma's breath caught. That voice, that confidence, that ridiculous thick Igbo accent. She cleared her throat, forcing herself to remain composed.
Chief Obiora, to what do I owe this unexpected visit?
Obiora's lips curved into a smirk.
I'm in Lagos for business, and I couldn't be in your city without seeing you.
Chioma raised a brow.
Business, you say?
Yes?
He said smoothly, leaning on the edge of her desk.
Business of taking you out to dinner.
Chioma folded her arms.
You don't waste time, do you?
Obiora chuckled.
A man who hesitates loses.
She eyed him carefully. The last thing she needed was to get caught up in another whirlwind romance. But something about him made her heart race. Maybe her friends were right. Maybe she had been running for too long. She exhaled.
Fine. One dinner.
Obiora grinned.
Good. Where's something beautiful?
And just like that, Chioma found herself agreeing to a date she never thought she would. Chioma sat across from Chief Obiora in an upscale Lagos restaurant, the ambient lighting casting a soft glow on their table. He had chosen the place, one of those exclusive members-only spots where the waiters wore crisp white gloves and addressed patrons as Sir and Ma with exaggerated politeness. She had expected to feel out of place, but Obiora made it seem like she belonged there. Like she had always belonged there.
So, Achalugo,
Obiora said, sipping his wine.
tell me about your business.
Chioma blinked.
My business?
Yes, your perfume brand, Arena Essence.
He leaned forward slightly, his sharp eyes fixed on her.
What's happening with it?
Chioma hesitated. She rarely talked about her business with men she dated. Most of them either didn't care or saw it as a hobby rather than something serious. But Obiora was different. He wasn't just asking to make conversation. He wanted to know. She took a slow breath.
I haven't restocked in 8 months.
Obiora's brow furrowed. Why?
Work.
She exhaled.
My corporate job takes up all my time. I handle marketing for a big firm and the workload is insane. By the time I get home, I'm too exhausted to focus on my business.
Obiora was quiet for a moment. Then he smiled.
You know, you're selling yourself short.
Chioma's lips parted. How?
You're breaking your back for a company that would replace you in 2 seconds if you resigned. Meanwhile, your own business, your own legacy, is suffering.
Chioma stared at him, surprised by how easily he had summed up the exact thoughts she had been suppressing. Obiora shook his head.
Achalugo, you have something valuable in your hands. Perfume is luxury. It is class. You are class. Why are you treating yourself like a servant when you should be the boss?
Chioma opened her mouth but found herself speechless. This was not the kind of conversation she was used to having with men. Davis had spent 2 years asking her for money. Obiora, within one date, was telling her how to build wealth for herself. The contrast was dizzying. Obiora was full of surprises. Throughout dinner, he didn't dominate the conversation like most men of his status would. He listened. Not just the kind of surface-level listening men did when they were pretending to be interested. He actually paid attention. When she spoke about her struggles balancing work and business, he nodded thoughtfully and asked questions. When she mentioned her frustrations with her boss, he gave sound advice, not just empty motivational talk. And when she laughed about her mother's matchmaking antics, he chuckled deeply and said,
I like your mother. She has good taste.
Chioma shook her head.
She's convinced you're the best thing that's ever happened to me.
Obiora smirked.
She's a wise woman.
Chioma rolled her eyes.
Oh, please, I don't even know why we're here. You're not my type.
Obiora leaned back in his chair, amusement flickering in his eyes.
Who is your type then?
Chioma opened her mouth, then shut it.
Who?
Was her type.
Davis. Broke, unstable, full of empty promises.
Her past relationships had been a string of financially struggling men she had tried to help. She had poured money, time, and emotional energy into them, hoping they would rise. None of them ever did. Now, here was Obiora. Successful. Stable. A man who didn't need her help, but wanted her. And somehow that terrified her. The days that followed the date were strange. Chioma found herself waiting for Obiora to call, even though she told herself she didn't care. When her phone buzzed, she would glance at it just a little too quickly, and when his name popped up, she would deliberately not answer. It wasn't that she didn't enjoy his attention. She did. But he unsettled her. He reminded her too much of her father. Her father had been a wealthy, powerful Igbo man too. A man who had taken her mother as his Nigerian wife while keeping his real family in the UK. A man who had given them luxury but never love. Chioma had grown up watching her mother accept less, watching her mother settle. She had promised herself she would never follow that path. And yet, here was Obiora. Rich, Igbo, persistent. It was too much, too familiar. So she did the only thing she knew how to do. She avoided him. 3 days later, her phone buzzed again. Obiora. She sighed. This man was not getting the hint. She let it ring out, ignoring it. Then a text.
Acha Lugo, I know you're ignoring me, but I don't chase shadows. If you don't want me, say it with your chest. Otherwise, I'm coming to see you tomorrow.
Chioma's heart skipped. Coming to see her? She hesitated before typing.
Obiora, I've just been busy with work.
He replied instantly.
Lies, but it's okay. I'll see you tomorrow.
Chioma groaned, throwing her phone onto the couch. Why did she feel both nervous and excited at the same time? She didn't have an answer. But she knew one thing. She wasn't ready for what was coming. Chioma stared at the extravagant display in front of her, a collection of gifts, all from Obiora. A box of the finest chocolates imported from Belgium, a bouquet of deep red roses, their scent filling her apartment. A silk scarf in the richest shade of emerald green, her favorite color. And sitting at the center of it all was a necklace. Not just any necklace, a diamond necklace. She let out a deep breath. This man was doing too much. Obiora had been relentless. She had ignored his calls, sidestepped his texts, and even told herself she wasn't interested. But did Obiora back down? Instead, he doubled his efforts, like a man who knew what he wanted and wasn't afraid to go after it. And that was part of the problem. Chioma's friends had had enough.
Chioma, you're actually mad.
Ifeoma said, shaking her head. Doreen folded her arms.
You finally find a man who treats you well, and because of what? His accent? My dear, the village people are working overtime on your case.
Chioma scowled, stuffing a forkful of jollof rice into her mouth.
It's not just the accent.
Then what is it?
Ifeoma demanded.
Is he ugly?
No.
Does he have body odor?
No.
Does he have an attitude problem?
Chioma sighed. No.
Then what exactly is the problem?
Doreen pressed.
Because if you say his accent one more time, I will slap you.
Chioma groaned.
I don't know, I feel like he's too much. Too wealthy, too sure of himself, too
different from all those broke boys you wasted your time on.
Ifeoma cut in. Chioma rolled her eyes.
They were not broke boys.
Doreen scoffed.
My dear, let's not lie to ourselves. What did Davis do again? Forex, virtual real estate, Uber, which one actually worked?
Chioma had no answer. Ifeoma leaned in.
You're running from happiness, Chioma. This man loves you, and you're looking for reasons to run. But ask yourself, if Obiora was struggling to make ends meet and needed you to loan him money, would you still be running?
Chioma opened her mouth, then closed it. Her friends had a point. A very annoying point. Obiora was not the kind of man to chase a woman desperately. But he was also not the kind of man to give up easily. He gave her space, but never let her forget he was there. Flowers arrived at her office every few days. Short, charming texts popped up on her phone. Not too often, just enough to keep her thinking about him. And then came the necklace, the final straw. Chioma wasn't even sure how it arrived. One moment she was preparing for a client meeting. The next, her assistant, Lotta, walked in with an elegantly wrapped box.
This came for you, Ma.
Chioma frowned.
From who?
I think you already know.
Chioma hesitated before unwrapping it. And when she saw the necklace, glistening diamonds set in a delicate gold chain, her heart did something strange. A tiny, inconvenient flutter. She swallowed. This man was serious about her. Later that night, She sat in her living room, staring at the necklace as it rested in its case. None of her exes had ever done something like this. Davis had borrowed money from her. Other men had taken her for granted. But Obiora gave. Not just material things. He gave his time, his attention, his unwavering commitment. Chioma sighed. She was in trouble. Because no matter how much she tried to deny it, she was falling for this man. And it was annoying. Chioma never imagined one argument could change everything. She had been enjoying her little bubble, accepting Obiora's gifts, soaking up his attention, but still keeping him at arm's length. She told herself she wasn't leading him on. She was just taking her time. Then he confronted her, and suddenly, everything was on the table. Chioma had an important networking event at a high-end restaurant in Lagos. All the biggest names in the industry would be there: executives, media moguls, and influential business people. And yet, she didn't invite Obiora. Not because she didn't want to, but because she was afraid. Afraid of the looks. Afraid of the whispers. Afraid of the unspoken judgment that would come with dating a wealthy Igbo man with a thick accent. But Obiora found out, and he was not pleased.
Why didn't you invite me?
His voice was calm, but Chioma could hear the sharp edge underneath. She sighed, rubbing her forehead.
Obiora, it's not that simple.
It is. Either you want me in your life, or you don't.
Chioma groaned.
Don't make this a big deal. It was just a work thing.
A work thing?
He folded his arms, his strong frame filling the room.
Chioma, if I were a struggling man with an uncertain future, you wouldn't be embarrassed to introduce me. But because I am successful, because I don't speak English the way your corporate friends do, suddenly I'm a problem.
Her stomach twisted. That was not what she meant.
It's not like that.
She said quickly.
Then what is it like?
Silence. Obiora shook his head.
I knew it. You are ashamed of me.
Chioma clenched her fists.
Obiora, don't start.
No, you listen to me.
His voice was firm but not angry, just disappointed.
I have met women like you before. Women who want love but are afraid of what it looks like. Women who want security but don't want to admit it. You think I am too Igbo for you, Chioma?
She swallowed, unable to answer. Obiora exhaled.
I will not force myself on a woman who cannot stand proudly beside me.
He turned to leave.
Let me know when you decide what you truly want.
And then he was gone. Chioma stood frozen, her heart hammering in her chest. She didn't have time to process the argument because the very next day, her mother showed up at her house, unannounced, uninvited, and on a mission. Chioma opened the door to see Madame Okogie standing there with her handbag, a stern expression on her face.
Mommy?
Her mother pushed past her into the apartment.
Chioma, where is your sense?
Chioma sighed.
Not this again.
Are you mad?
Madame Okogie cut in.
Chioma, do you know how many women in this village have been begging their daughters to marry Chief Obiora? Do you know how many mothers have carried their girls to his house, hoping he will just glance at them?
Chioma winced. Mommy.
Do you think good men grow on trees?
Chioma groaned, shutting the door.
I am not discussing this.
Oh, we will discuss it.
Her mother set down her handbag and sat on the couch.
Because I am not leaving this house until you tell me what is wrong with you.
Chioma dragged a hand over her face. Here we go. When she ignored her mother's rants and tried to escape into her room, Madame Okogie took things to the next level. She sat at the dining table, arms folded, and refused to eat.
Mommy,
What are you doing? Chioma asked, narrowing her eyes.
I am fasting.
for what?
Her mother lifted her chin.
Until you agree to date Obiora, I will not eat.
Chioma's jaw dropped.
Mommy, are you serious?
Dead serious.
You can't just stop eating because of a man.
Watch me!
Chioma stared at her mother in disbelief. This woman was dramatic, but she was also stubborn. By evening, her mother was lying on the couch, hand over her forehead, sighing deeply.
Chioma, my stomach is empty.
Chioma groaned.
Mommy, please stop this nonsense.
I can feel myself growing weaker. Ah, suffering! I carried you for 9 months and this is how you repay me?
Chioma covered her face with both hands. She was trapped. Her relationship was falling apart. Her mother was starving herself. And worst of all, she couldn't stop thinking about Obiora's words.
I will not force myself on a woman who cannot stand proudly beside me.
And the truth was, he was right. Obiora sat in his hotel room, staring at the untouched glass of whiskey on the table. He wasn't the kind of man who let emotions shake him, but tonight he was unsettled. Chioma was slipping away from him. For the first time in his life, a woman had rejected him, not because he wasn't enough, but because he was too much of something she feared. Wealthy, Igbo, confident, and for the life of him, he couldn't understand why. That was until Chioma's friends came to see him. It was late when he heard the knock on his hotel door. He considered ignoring it, but when he opened it, he found Ifeyinwa and Chichi standing there. Their faces were serious.
Can we come in?
Ifeyinwa asked. Obiora hesitated for a second, then stepped aside. The two women walked in and sat on the couch.
Why are you here?
He asked, folding his arms. Chichi sighed.
Because we know you love her.
Obiora didn't answer. Ifeyinwa leaned forward.
Chioma loves you too, but she is scared.
Obiora scoffed.
Of what? A good life?
Of history repeating itself.
He frowned.
What do you mean?
The room fell silent before Chichi took a deep breath.
Has Chioma ever told you about her father?
Obiora shook his head. Chichi looked at Ifeyinwa before turning back to him.
Then let me tell you the truth.
Chioma had spent her entire life avoiding men like Obiora. Her father, Chief Okoje, was a successful businessman, wealthy and well-respected. But what people didn't know was that he had 2 families, one in Nigeria, one in the UK. For years, Chioma's mother had been his secret wife, raising Chioma alone while he built his empire. Everything had been fine until the British wife found out. One day, the woman flew to Nigeria, stormed into their home, and humiliated them. She called Chioma and her mother bastards. She spat on the ground in front of them and swore that Chioma would never be acknowledged as part of the family. Chief Okoje, the man Chioma had once thought was a hero, did nothing. He didn't defend them. He didn't choose them. He simply let them suffer. That day, Chioma learned a lesson she never forgot. Rich, Igbo men could not be trusted. They were powerful, dominant, controlling, and when the time came to choose, they always chose themselves. When Chichi finished speaking, Obiora sat still, processing everything.
She has spent her whole life running from men like you,
Ifeyinwa
said softly. Not because you are bad, but because you remind her of the man who broke her.
Obiora exhaled deeply.
She is scared that one day she will become her mother, watching the man she loves walk away.
His jaw tightened. Chioma had been expecting him to disappoint her. She had been waiting for him to leave, to prove her right. But what she didn't know was that Obiora was not her father. He was a man who knew what he wanted, and he wanted her. He stood up, adjusting his shirt.
Where is she?
Chioma sat alone in her apartment, staring blankly at her laptop screen. She had ignored her mother's hunger strike, ignored Obiora's calls, and even ignored her own feelings. Her heart was at war with itself. Then, a knock on the door. She frowned, standing up slowly. When she opened the door, Obiora was standing there. She stiffened.
What are you doing here?
He stared at her for a long moment before saying,
I know.
Chioma's stomach clenched.
Know what?
About your father. About why you're afraid of me.
Her breath hitched.
Who told you?
Does it matter? His voice was gentle. Chioma, I need you to look at me and see me, not him.
Her vision blurred. She wanted to believe him. But how could she? Tears rolled down her cheeks before she could stop them.
Obiora, I don't know how to let go of this fear.
He stepped closer, his large hands cradling her face.
Then let me teach you.
Chioma let out a shaky breath.
And if you leave me one day?
Obiora's eyes darkened.
I am not a man who walks away.
Silence. She wanted to believe him. She needed to believe him. And for the first time in years, Chioma let someone hold her as she cried. For the first time in years, Chioma was free. She had done it. She had walked into her boss's office, submitted her resignation letter, and walked out without looking back. No more endless hours of stress, no more abusive superiors, no more feeling undervalued. She was done. Her perfume business, Arene Essence, had been waiting for her to take it seriously. Now, she finally could. And yet, something was missing. Obiora had been silent. Since that night when he held her as she cried, he had pulled away. No more calls, no more lavish gifts, no more texts in the morning, asking how she slept. At first, Chioma told herself it was good. She needed space. But by the second week, she was losing her mind. She checked her phone constantly, hoping for a message that never came. She scrolled through old conversations, rereading them. She stared at the expensive necklace he had given her, still in its box, still unworn. She had never loved anyone the way she loved Obiora, and she had pushed him away. Chioma sat on the floor of her apartment, surrounded by perfume bottles, trying to distract herself. Her hands trembled as she tried to mix a new scent, but nothing was working. Everything felt off. She grabbed her phone, hovering over Obiora's name. She had so many things to say, but her pride wouldn't let her call. Her eyes burned as tears slipped down her cheeks. Her chest ached. Was this what heartbreak felt like? She had been so focused on protecting herself that she hadn't realized she was the one causing her own pain. She let out a deep, shaky breath.
I'm such an idiot.
Her breakdown must have been obvious because the next day, her friends showed up. Ifeyinwa and Chichi barged into her apartment without warning.
Enough.
Chichi declared, tossing her handbag on the couch.
We are tired.
Chioma frowned.
Tired of what?
Ifeyinwa folded her arms.
Of watching you ruin your own happiness.
Chioma sighed, rubbing her temples.
I don't need this right now.
Chichi sat beside her.
Yes, you do, because you're stubborn, and if we leave you alone, you'll let a good man slip away.
Chioma remained silent. Ifeyinwa sat on the other side, trapping her in.
Chioma, we know you. You are proud, independent, and scared as hell.
Chichi nodded.
But you also love him.
Chioma swallowed hard.
What if he leaves me?
Ifeyinwa grabbed her shoulders.
What if he doesn't?
Silence. Chichi took Chioma's hands.
You're punishing a man who has done nothing wrong. You are pushing him away because of a fear that is not his fault. Chioma, is that fair?
Tears welled up in her eyes.
No.
Then fix it.
That night, Chioma made up her mind. She grabbed her phone and called Obiora. It rang and rang and rang. Then, voicemail. Her heart plummeted. She tried again. Still nothing. Panic settled in. Had she waited too long? Was it already too late? Chioma wasn't one to beg. She wasn't one to chase. But this was different. He was different. She grabbed her car keys and rushed out. She was done running. It was time to fight for love. Chioma had never driven so fast in her life. She weaved through the Lagos traffic, gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing keeping her sane. Her heart was racing, her mind spinning. What if she was too late? What if he had moved on? What if... No, she couldn't think like that. She wouldn't think like that. Obiora had fought for her, over and over again. Now it was her turn. Tonight she was going to tell him how she felt. Tonight she was going to ask him to be hers forever. Tonight she was going to propose. Chioma parked outside Obiora's mansion, her stomach twisting with nerves. The security man recognized her and let her in without question. She stepped out, smoothing her dress, her palms sweaty. This was it. She had never proposed to a man before, never even imagined herself doing it. But for Obiora, she would. She knocked. Silence. She knocked again, harder this time. Still nothing. Her heart pounded. What if he wasn't home? She pulled out her phone to call him, but before she could dial, the door swung open. And there he was. Obiora, dressed in a black kaftan, barefoot, his eyes holding the same intensity she had fallen for. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then he exhaled.
Finally!
Chioma swallowed hard.
Obiora,
He shook his head.
Come inside.
She hesitated.
I just need to say something first.
Inside, Chioma.
His tone was firm, and it left no room for argument. With a deep breath, she stepped in. The house smelled like vanilla and sandalwood, just like him. He led her to the living room, where 2 glasses of wine were already on the table. Like he had been waiting for her. He sat down, but she remained standing, fidgeting.
Obiora, I know I've been difficult. I know I've pushed you away, but
He raised a hand, stopping her mid-sentence.
Sit.
She hesitated, then obeyed, her heart hammering. Obiora leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees.
Chioma, do you love me?
Her breath caught in her throat.
Yes.
Do you want to be with me?
Her voice was barely a whisper. Yes. He studied her, his dark eyes unreadable.
Then why do you keep running?
Tears welled up in her eyes. She had no excuse, no defense. She was tired of running. She was exhausted.
I'm done running,
she whispered. Chioma reached into her handbag, fingers trembling. Her plan had been to get on one knee, to tell him how much he meant to her, to ask him to be hers forever. But before she could pull out the ring, Obiora reached into his pocket first. She froze. A small velvet box appeared in his hand. Her mouth fell open.
What?
Obiora opened the box, revealing a stunning diamond ring. He had beaten her to it. Her vision blurred with tears as he smiled.
You thought you were coming here to propose?
Chioma nodded, speechless. He chuckled.
Chioma, I knew from the first day I saw you that you were mine. I was just waiting for you to see it too.
Tears streamed down her face.
Obiora, I'm so sorry.
He shook his head.
No more apologies.
He reached for her hand, slipping the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly.
No more excuses, no more overthinking, less talk, more action. Do you trust me?
She nodded rapidly.
Then marry me.
She burst into laughter through her tears.
I was supposed to say that to you.
He grinned.
Too slow, my love.
Chioma finally surrendered. No more fear, no more doubts, no more running.
Yes.
She whispered.
Yes, Obiora, I'll marry you.
Obiora pulled her into his arms, pressing a kiss to her forehead. And in that moment, Chioma knew. She had never felt safer in her life. Chioma stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the satin robe around her shoulders. Her reflection stared back at her, a version of herself she never imagined, glowing, at peace, in love. She had fought this feeling, denied it, pushed it away. But here she was, engaged, happy, loved. A slow smile spread across her lips. She had spent years running from the kind of man Obiora was, yet he was the one who had grounded her, the one who had seen beyond her walls and refused to let her go. Chioma had always been a woman of action. So after saying yes to Obiora, she threw herself into her perfume business with the same fire she once reserved for her corporate job. The difference? This time she was building something for herself. With Obiora's encouragement, she expanded Irene Essence into something bigger than she had ever dreamed of. She secured a shop in Ikoyi. Her perfumes were gaining attention on social media, and big influencers started reaching out for collaborations. For the first time in her life, she wasn't just surviving, she was thriving. And Obiora, he was there through it all. The day after their engagement, Chioma's mother had nearly fainted from joy.
Chineke, I knew it! I knew you were meant for each other!
The entire family had celebrated like it was a national event, and before Chioma could even process what was happening, wedding plans were in full swing. She wasn't complaining, though. For the first time, she felt safe in love. No games, no doubts, no waiting for the other shoe to drop. Just love. Pure, unshakable, undeniable love.
You're staring at yourself again.
Chioma turned at the sound of Doreen's voice. Her best friend leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, a knowing smile on her face. Chioma huffed.
I'm just getting used to this.
To what?
She gestured around the bridal boutique. Everything. The love. The security. The fact that she was standing in a white gown, ready to become somebody's wife. Doreen chuckled.
Babe, you deserve this happiness. Stop acting like it's borrowed.
Chioma sighed, smoothing the dress fabric.
It still feels surreal.
Because you've been fighting it for too long?
Chioma met her best friend's gaze, her heart swelling. Doreen was right. She had spent so many years dodging love, rejecting happiness, and convincing herself she didn't need a man. But Obiora wasn't just a man. He was her man, and she was his. The morning of the wedding, Chioma sat in the bridal suite, surrounded by her closest friends and family. She should have been nervous. Instead, she was calm. For the first time in her life, she wasn't questioning her choices. She wasn't afraid. A knock at the door made her turn. Her mother peeked in, eyes shining with pride.
My daughter,
she whispered.
Are you ready?
Chioma smiled.
More than ever.
Her mother stepped inside, pressing a kiss to her forehead.
I have waited for this day for so long,
she said.
And look at you. You found a man who truly sees you.
Chioma's eyes watered. She had spent so much time rejecting everything her mother wanted for her. And now, she finally saw the truth. Her mother never wanted to control her. She just wanted her to have the kind of love that lasts. And she had found it, with Obiora. As Chioma walked down the aisle, Obiora's eyes never left hers. In them, she saw everything she had ever wanted. Security, devotion, love. She had spent years running from this, but in the end, it had found her anyway. She reached him, her fingers slipping into his, the missing piece of her life clicking into place. And as they exchanged vows, as he called her his wife, Chioma finally laughed at herself. She had once believed she didn't need love, that it wasn't for her, that she was better off alone. But now she knew the truth. She had never wanted love. but it was exactly what she needed. And yet with Obiora, she had found the greatest love of all.